Well, look, for those who don't know, you have been writing about guns and the Second Amendment for quite some time now, and you generally take a little bit different take, not like a contrarian view, although that can happen, but generally it's kind of a, have you thought of it from this angle? At least that's the way I look at stuff, and that's why I really do enjoy your take on things, because it's always one of those, I don't think I thought of it that way. Now, I don't know where you get that from. Have you always been that way?
Yeah, and I've always been contrarian too, I guess. But this had to do with basically this whole business of deciding what's in common use at the time.
Okay, well, back up. Explain where the common use phrase comes from.
It actually comes from the, Heller referenced it, but it actually comes from the Miller case, okay?
1939.
I'm sorry?
1939 Miller case.
Right, and where Miller's holding that the sorts of weapons protected are those in common use at the time, okay, is the way that Heller referred to it. And Miller, of course, said that a weapon had to have some reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficiency of a well-regulated militia, or that this weapon is any part of the ordinary military equipment, or that its use could contribute to the common defense. And so starting from there, I wrote an article, geez, Tom, it was back in 2002, so that's some time ago, for Guns and Ammo magazine. And the title of it was called Things to Come. And what inspired it was I was seeing all kinds of weapons developments that were happening. You know, things from including energy weapons and microwave weapons and tetanizing weapons, meaning like think lockjaw, like a lockjaw ray that'll freeze your muscles up. And I'm thinking, you know, we have all these developments happening. And yet, you know, you take a look at any select fire rifle manufactured after May 1986, and it'll say, you know, for government, you know, or law enforcement use only. You can't get it. And I'm thinking, well, you know, what about these developments that are going to happen if it's in common use at the time, and these firearms or weapons developments are banned to we the people? Then what happens to the Second Amendment and the core purpose behind the Second Amendment?
Well, and let me just I'm going to circle back for a second to put a fine point on this for people. I don't know if they clearly would have understood. In the Miller decision, 1939, the U.S. Supreme Court said you can have a gun that has a purpose in the militia or the military. If you read that the way I read that, that means that anything the military has, at least as long as it's not like, you know, I don't know where the line is drawn on there, but pretty much anything that's handheld or even maybe even crew served, you can and should be able to own, according to the Supreme Court. Did I miss something here?
No, this is it exactly, and according to, you know, if you want to go back and read what the founders said, read quotes from Tench Coxe or you know, read quotes from James Madison in the Federalist Papers, or just take a look at the Constitution that makes provisions for letters of marque and reprisal. You know, Biden out there saying you can't own cannons. Well, I'm sorry, but they had privateers with ships that were fully equipped, naval ships in those days, and the Constitution still provides for that.
Okay, so now we have Judge Benitez out in California, and in this case that we're applauding right now, but he talks about modern guns, modern rifles, as opposed to, you know, ARs or whatever, and the language starts to get fuzzy around the common use idea, and you're kind of sounding the warning of, hey, be careful about this whole common use concept. What do you mean?
Yeah, well, because if it's common use based on what's popular, then all government has to do to keep it from being common use is to ban it. Okay, you know, then it's no longer in common use. And to my way of thinking, and to read it with an eye towards what the founders intended and the purpose, the core purpose of the Second Amendment, to be in common use, it has to be in common use by the military. Otherwise, what you're saying is you're saying the well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of a free state. It would be suicide to send citizens out there in the field against people who are equipped with, you know, full modern weaponry, and we're limited to duck guns and things of that nature.
the core purpose of the Second Amendment, you mentioned that. What is the core purpose of the Second Amendment?
Well, it's defense of self, of community, and of country, depending on what the need is and what the threat is. Ultimately, the core purpose of the Second Amendment is for the citizenry to be able to get together and defend itself and defend its Constitution and defend its country. It's why they put the well-regulated militia first, and that's not to say that the other uses for firearms aren't also legitimate and weren't also envisioned by the founders. But what I'm saying is that we have forgotten this. We have allowed the word militia to be demonized. Our government has conveniently displayed deliberate indifference towards making this a fact of modern life. And to my way of thinking, the security of a free state is what has suffered from that.
I could not agree with you more on that. And for those who would say, well, they never imagined at the time having, semi-automatic firearms or guns that held so many rounds, you might want to just correct them on that one.
Yeah, absolutely, because first of all, we have to understand that the founders were incredibly literate men. Okay, they understood Roman law, they understood Latin, they understood Greek, they understood historical developments, they understood technology. Look at Benjamin Franklin and his inventions. Look at Thomas Jefferson. Talk about a man of all disciplines and the technology that he was involved with. And they knew, at the time, they knew that there were things like volley guns that went back hundreds of years. Leonardo da Vinci, came up with a design for a 3-barrel cannon. There were things like puckle guns. There were breech loaders. The Ferguson rifle that the Brits had. A friend of mine, former editor at Guns Magazine, Jeff John, has done a book on the Ferguson rifle in his Art in Arms website that I did a review on. And, there were all kinds of technological developments that were happening and that were coming around the corner. The founders were well aware that what they were looking for was going to continue to develop, and the weapons at the time, the weapons that were in common use at the time by the civilian population, were identical, if not superior, in function and capability to what the Brits were fielding with their Brown Bess muskets. Whereas, in our case, some of our guys had Kentucky rifles.
Mm-hmm. So in that sense, and actually literally, what the Second Amendment says is people should be able to have whatever is in common use by the military.
You got it. That's exactly right. And you made a really good point by bringing up the objection that the antis give us that, well, the founders couldn't have envisioned. And the point that I come back at that with is, and we can't envision what they're going to have 200 years from now. Yeah, what are they going to have? And I mentioned early on, some of the weapons developments that are happening right now, some of it sounds like science fiction. Okay, and when you see, and at the time in 2002, when I initially wrote my guns and ammo article, they were talking about a disintegrator ray on an aircraft. Okay,
right,
and sure, at the time the power requirements for something like that requires, just a whole big room-sized apparatus. And I was equating that to, I'm probably a little older than you, and I remember when computers were in development, and we had computers that filled whole rooms that were tape drives, and in order to utilize them, you needed to fill out 80-column forms, and you needed to send those to a department called Key Punch, which would then use that, put that into a reader.
Cards.
Yeah, and now your cell phone has more computing power than those machines did. So
exactly.
we can't imagine what's around the corner.
Yeah, but the Second Amendment holds true. David, I know you got a whole lot more on this. I want people to go and read what you're saying, to follow what you're doing, because I count you as being one of the big thinkers in terms of Second Amendment, and I appreciate what you do. How can people follow you?
Well, thank you, Tom. Best way, waronguns.com. That'll be what'll get you to my stuff on AmmoLand. That'll get you to my stuff on Firearms News. So waronguns.com. And just let me wrap it by saying that, you know what, at one point, people said a battle wasn't won until a man with a rifle occupied the field. And somebody probably once said the same thing about spears, and we can't be in that position.
There you go. David Codrea, thank you so much for everything you do.